My name is Jessica Davies, a 35-year-old artist. My life felt perfectly framed, like one of my completed canvases. I poured my soul into my art, finding solace and expression in every stroke, every color. My days were filled with the quiet hum of creation, the scent of oils and turpentine, and the comforting presence of David, my husband of 10 years. Our loft in Seattle was more than just a home. It was our shared sanctuary, a space where light poured in, illuminating our dreams and our seemingly unbreakable bond. Rachel, my older sister, was a frequent visitor, often coming to admire my latest work, always with a critical eye disguised as caring advice. I never suspected the darkness festering beneath the surface. Then came the moment the canvas ripped, David and Rachel caught in a shocking embrace that shattered every illusion. The divorce that followed was a brutal, drawn-out affair made even more agonizing by David's family, who, instead of offering solace, sided with him and Rachel, painting me as the unstable, jealous wife. Their betrayal cut deeper than any brushstroke, leaving me adrift in a sea of pain. 6 months later, as I was slowly trying to piece myself back together, my phone began to buzz incessantly. A torrent of desperate, frantic messages from David filled my inbox, revealing a truth so twisted, so profoundly shocking, that it not only redefined betrayal but finally set me free. It was a truth that urged me to pack my life into boxes, leave Seattle, and journey to a quiet coastal town, where the rhythmic crash of waves would help me reclaim my peace, my art, and myself. The shock of betrayal, especially from those closest to you, can feel like the end of your world. But sometimes it's just the beginning of discovering a hidden truth, a secret layer beneath the canvas of your life, waiting to be exposed. What happens next, and the deep thoughts that unfolded on this journey, might just resonate with your own experiences. To hear the rest of my story, make sure to like and subscribe to join me on this path of unexpected revelations. My studio, located in the heart of our sprawling Seattle loft, was more than just a workspace. It was where I truly lived, where my soul breathed. Sunlight, thick and golden, streamed through the expansive industrial windows each morning, illuminating canvases in various stages of completion. Some were still raw with potential, the gesso stark white, waiting for the first stroke of inspiration. Others were already vibrant, bursting with color and form, their finished dreams reflecting back the light. I was Jessica Davies, 35 years old, an artist whose hands were often stained with paint, whose mind hummed with creative energy. My life, meticulously composed, felt as perfectly balanced and harmonious as my most intricate oil painting. My art was not just a profession. It was my passion, my calling, a universe of texture, color, and form that I meticulously crafted. When I wasn't lost in the intense, almost meditative process of creation, my world revolved around David, my husband of 10 years. He was an investment banker, driven and charismatic, with a sharp mind and a smile that could disarm anyone. We had met at a pretentious gallery opening in Pioneer Square, where he'd feigned a deep understanding of abstract expressionism, a performance I'd found both amusing and charming. Our courtship had been a whirlwind of romantic dinners overlooking Puget Sound, spontaneous weekend getaways to hidden coastal towns, and intense, sprawling conversations about everything and nothing. Our marriage, a decade strong, felt like a masterpiece of shared dreams, laughter, and unwavering support. We'd cultivated a life of comfortable elegance in our loft, a space filled with overflowing art books, quirky vintage furniture we'd found in antique shops, and the subtle, comforting scent of my oil paints mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. We hosted intimate dinner parties, where the clinking of glasses and lively chatter echoed off the exposed brick walls. We traveled to Europe for various art fairs and David's business conferences, posting enviable photos from charming Parisian cafes and ancient Roman ruins. We often spoke of starting a family, imagining tiny hands one day dabbling in watercolors beside me in the studio, a future stretching out, seemingly limitless and bright. My older sister, Rachel, was 2 years my senior, a successful interior designer with a keen eye for aesthetics, though often a sharper tongue and a more critical gaze. Growing up in the sprawling suburbs of Portland, our relationship had always been a complex tapestry of sisterly affection and subtle rivalry. She was effortlessly glamorous, commanding attention wherever she went, always perfectly put together, while I preferred the quiet intensity of my studio, my comfort found in worn paint-splattered jeans. After her last long-term relationship ended rather dramatically, a messy breakup with a flamboyant architect, Rachel began spending more time at our loft. Ostensibly, it was to offer moral support, a shoulder to cry on. But she also volunteered to help me with my studio organization, which mostly involved moving things around and then losing them, or advised David on home decor, which usually led to expensive, unnecessary purchases. I genuinely believed she was trying to reconnect, to strengthen our bond as adults after years of mild sibling competition. I rationalized her lingering presence and her increasingly frequent drop-ins when I was out or away for art shows, attributing them to her recent heartbreak and her desperate need for family comfort and a sense of belonging. I remember one evening, David had been unusually quiet during dinner, almost withdrawn, his eyes fixed on his plate. Rachel, on the other hand, had kept glancing at him, a strange, almost knowing look in her eyes, a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. I had dismissed it, thinking it was probably some inside joke about work, a shared secret from one of their decorating excursions or a client she wasn't privy to. I was so convinced of the integrity of my own life that I couldn't imagine a malicious intent behind their seemingly innocent exchanges. David, usually so attentive, so engaged, had also started exhibiting peculiar behaviors. His phone became an almost literal extension of his hand, always face down on the table, always muted. He'd disappear for late-night calls with clients more frequently, sometimes returning home with the faint, unfamiliar scent of a different, more expensive cologne than his usual crisp citrus. When I'd playfully tease him about his secret meetings or his new scent, he'd deflect with a practiced charm or a quick change of subject. "Just working hard for us, sweetheart," he'd say, pulling me into a hug that felt slightly less genuine each time, effectively ending the conversation. I remembered finding a delicate silver bracelet tucked into the pocket of his dress pants after a black-tie charity gala he'd attended alone. It was exquisitely crafted, far too delicate and feminine for him, and definitely not my style. It wasn't the kind of jewelry I would ever choose for myself. When I asked him about it, his response was immediate, almost too quick, fabricating a smooth story about it being a lost and found item from the event, which he was holding onto for the event coordinator until she could retrieve it. I foolishly believed him, trusting his word implicitly, never questioning the flimsy explanation. Looking back, these were not just isolated incidents. They were subtle, insidious cracks appearing in the pristine facade of my perfect canvas, whispers of a discordant note in what I believed was a symphony of love. I was an artist, trained to see details, to pick up on the slightest variation in light or shadow, yet I was utterly blind to the masterpiece of deceit unfolding right before my eyes. My love and unwavering trust acted as an opaque varnish, obscuring the grim, undeniable truth that lay beneath. The signs were there, woven into the very fabric of our daily lives like errant threads in a tapestry, but my love and trust acted as an opaque varnish, obscuring the truth. Rachel's visits became more and more frequent, not just to the loft but to David's downtown office. She would casually offer to pick up his dry cleaning, drop off forgotten documents, or even bring him lunch, citing that she was in the neighborhood anyway or had a client nearby. David's colleagues, whom I occasionally met at company events, would sometimes make innocuous comments like, "Oh, Rachel's been around a lot lately, hasn't she?" Or, "She seems very invested in David's work, always popping by." I'd always brush them off with a proud smile, thinking how wonderful it was that my sister and husband got along so well. I truly thought their bond was a testament to how seamlessly our families had blended. It made our lives feel fuller, richer. There was a particular incident during a shared family vacation to Hawaii, a trip David had planned as a surprise anniversary gift. David had seemed distant, often on his phone, engaged in hushed conversations he'd quickly end when I approached. Rachel had been unusually solicitous towards him, bringing him coffee in the mornings before I was even awake, offering him back massages by the pool, which he readily accepted, and constantly whispering secrets and inside jokes with him. I remembered feeling a flicker of annoyance, a childish jealousy that I quickly suppressed. After all, they were siblings-in-law, and Rachel was just being helpful, being herself. I convinced myself that my slight irritation was just exhaustion from the travel, or perhaps the typical sibling dynamic playing out. I never once considered the darker implications, the grotesque possibility that their seemingly innocent camaraderie was a meticulously crafted charade, a performance designed for my benefit. My artist's eye for nuance, usually so sharp, so adept at detecting subtle shifts in tone or texture, was completely dulled by the unwavering belief in my husband's fidelity and my sister's love. My world was so secure, so carefully built, that the idea of its foundation being eaten away by termites of betrayal was simply unthinkable. The subtle shifts in my perfectly painted life began to take on a more unsettling hue, like colors bleeding into each other on a canvas. David, usually so open and communicative, grew increasingly guarded. His phone, once a casual object, became a fortress of privacy. He'd take calls in other rooms, his voice hushed, and any glance from me would result in a quick hang-up and a flustered explanation about a sensitive client matter. When he'd emerge, he'd often try to overcompensate, asking overly enthusiastic questions about my day or suggesting an impromptu dinner out, almost as if to distract from his secretive behavior. My attempts at intimacy were often met with excuses of stress or exhaustion from his demanding job. "Long day, Jess," he'd murmur, turning away in bed, the chasm between us widening with each passing night. I found myself pacing the loft after he'd fallen asleep, a restless anxiety gnawing at me. My art, once a source of endless inspiration, felt stagnant, my canvases mirroring the gray uncertainty that had begun to seep into my marriage. It was as if a vibrant color had begun to fade, leaving behind a dull, muddy palette. Rachel, meanwhile, became an almost permanent fixture in our lives. She had a key to our loft, supposedly for emergencies, but she used it frequently, often letting herself in when I was at my gallery or teaching a workshop. She'd leave behind a lingering scent of her distinctive jasmine perfume, a subtle, sweet, and now unsettling aroma that seemed to cling to David's clothes, particularly his dress shirts. "Oh, Rachel stopped by to drop off some files for me," David would say casually, or "she brought me lunch, didn't want to disturb you in your studio." I started noticing little things, a new, expensive cashmere scarf that appeared in Rachel's closet, a designer handbag she suddenly owned, far beyond her usual budget as a freelance designer. When I complimented her on these new acquisitions, she'd simply shrug, her smile a little too wide, "Found a great sale online," or "client gift, you know how generous some of them can be." I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe the narrative of a loving sister and a dedicated husband, but a dissonant chord had struck in my heart, a tremor of unease that I couldn't quite silence. The pieces didn't quite fit, and my artist's eye, trained to spot disunity, began to register the disharmony. One evening, I returned home unexpectedly early from a meeting with a gallery owner, hoping to surprise David with dinner from his favorite Thai restaurant. As I approached our bedroom, I heard muffled voices, hushed laughter, and then David's voice, distinctively tender, almost conspiratorial. "She suspects nothing, my love. We're safe for now." My breath caught in my throat, a painful gasp. I stood frozen, my hand on the doorknob, my mind scrambling to make sense of the words. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. I pushed the thought away, telling myself I was being paranoid, that David was likely on a conference call, or perhaps even talking to one of his male colleagues using a term of endearment in jest. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear and denial, a drumbeat of dread. I took a deep breath, forcing a casual expression onto my face, a mask of nonchalance, and pushed the door open, ready to apologize for interrupting. David was indeed on the phone, but his eyes darted to me, a flicker of something that looked like pure panic in their depths, before he quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Just wrapping up," he said, too quickly, too smoothly. Rachel, who had been sitting on the edge of the bed, abruptly stood up, her cheeks flushed, a hand discreetly smoothing down her dress. "Oh, Jess, you're early. I was just helping David pick out a tie for tomorrow's big meeting. You know how indecisive he can be?" The tie, a rather loud patterned silk, lay untouched on the dresser, its bright colors mocking the dimness of my understanding. The incident, though seemingly innocent on the surface, left an indelible mark, a dark, jagged line in the previously vibrant canvas of my marriage. I couldn't shake the image of Rachel's flushed cheeks, David's panicked glance, and the lingering words, "She suspects nothing." My creative flow, once boundless, became a trickle. My studio, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating, its vibrant colors accusing. I started observing them with a new, colder eye. The casual touches, the shared glances, the way their conversations would abruptly halt when I entered a room, all these small details, once dismissed as harmless, now screamed of a hidden connection, a secret shared. I felt like an outsider in my own home, a ghost moving through familiar spaces that now seemed alien hostile. The trust, once so absolute, was dissolving like paint in water, leaving behind a bitter residue of doubt and growing suspicion. The colors of my life were fading, leaving behind only the stark outlines of a painful, undeniable truth. Every casual conversation felt like a performance, every interaction a carefully choreographed dance of deceit. The whispers in my mind grew louder, insisting that the paradise I believed I lived in was, in fact, a carefully constructed illusion. The realization that they were working together, a silent, insidious conspiracy against me, began to solidify, chilling me to my very core. The atmosphere in our loft, once vibrant with shared life, became thick with unspoken tension, a canvas left in perpetual twilight. My suspicions, once fleeting shadows, now coalesced into a heavy, oppressive cloud that clung to every corner of our home. I felt like I was walking through a dense fog, unable to grasp the true shapes of things, yet acutely aware of their ominous presence. David grew increasingly distant, his emotional unavailability cloaked in elaborate excuses of overwhelming work pressure. Client calls, complicated deals, sensitive negotiations, you wouldn't understand the stress, he'd dismiss, waving away my attempts at connection, his eyes avoiding mine. His phone, once a casual object, became a fortified extension of his body, never out of sight, always clutched tight, even during our infrequent dinners together. The moment I entered the room, the screen would flip face down, or he'd quickly pocket it with a jarring click, his movements too swift, too deliberate to be innocent. The subtle gaslighting began to chip away at my confidence, eroding my very sense of reality, making me question my own perceptions. "You're imagining things, Jess. You've been under a lot of stress with your new exhibition coming up," David would say, his voice laced with feigned concern, a master performance of a worried husband, when I gently brought up my unease. "Maybe you need to take a break, get some rest. You're seeing things that aren't there, sweetheart." Rachel, surprisingly, echoed his sentiments, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She'd arrive unannounced, always with a sympathetic ear, a listening posture, and then subtly twist my words, feeding my self-doubt. "Jessica, you know how sensitive you can be, especially about your art. Perhaps you're overthinking things. David loves you, you know. He's just under immense pressure at work and you're adding to it with these accusations." Her words, cloaked in sisterly care, felt like venom, poisoning my thoughts, making me feel as if I were truly losing my grip on reality. I confided in my closest artist friend, Sarah, during one of our weekly coffee dates. "I feel like I'm going crazy, Sarah. Every time I try to talk to David, he makes me feel like I'm hysterical or overly emotional or even paranoid. And Rachel backs him up on every single point, completely undermining me." Sarah, with her kind, steady eyes, simply advised, "Trust your gut, Jess. You're an artist. You see things others don't, especially when it comes to true colors. And David's been acting very strange lately. Too strange." Her words, a lifeline in the churning sea of my self-doubt, gave me a sliver of courage to keep looking, to keep probing. The financial anomalies started subtly, then became glaring, impossible to ignore. Our joint checking account, which David managed with an iron grip, usually robust and steadily growing, suddenly showed unexplained large withdrawals, sometimes multiple times a week. David, ever the financial wizard, offered vague, frustrating explanations. Market fluctuations, rebalancing portfolios to mitigate risk, investing in a new, high-yield opportunity. But my artist's intuition, honed to recognize patterns and inconsistencies, screamed otherwise. The numbers simply didn't add up. I noticed a significant, alarming drop in our savings, money earmarked for a new, long-planned studio extension and our dream of starting a family. When I pressed him about it, David grew visibly agitated, his charming facade cracking. "Are you questioning my financial judgment now, Jessica? Do you not trust me with our future? After all I do for us?" His words, sharp and accusatory, filled with righteous indignation, made me retreat, filled with guilt for daring to doubt him, for questioning the man who was supposed to be my partner. Then came the small, yet incredibly significant, details that chipped away at my composure. Rachel, whose interior design business seemed only modestly successful, suddenly sported a new luxury car, a sleek, expensive European model that seemed far beyond her declared income. She wore new diamond earrings, not ostentatious but clearly of significant value, sparkling in the light. When I asked about them, feigning casual interest, she simply laughed, a light, airy sound. "Oh, a bonus from a huge client project, darling." They were so thrilled with the penthouse redesign. Her explanations, like David's, were always just plausible enough to quiet immediate suspicion, but they left a lingering taste of unease, like an unfinished painting. My sleep became fractured, haunted by fragmented nightmares. I'd wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, the faint, cloying scent of Rachel's jasmine perfume lingering in the air of our bedroom, or the hushed sound of David's voice from the living room, whispering into his phone. I started keeping a small notebook by my bed, hidden beneath my pillow, jotting down every anomaly, every suspicious glance, every evasive answer, every inexplicable purchase. It was a desperate attempt to grasp at objective reality, to prove to myself that I wasn't, in fact, losing my mind. The once vibrant colors of my inner world were fading, replaced by a monochrome palette of suspicion and fear. My canvases in the studio stood untouched, accusing silent witnesses to the growing discord within me. David continued his charade, showering me with forced, almost performative affection on rare occasions, then retreating into his shell, leaving me feeling more bewildered and alone than ever. Rachel, meanwhile, maintained her facade of sympathetic sister, always there to offer a shoulder to cry on, always ready with an excuse for David's behavior, always subtly undermining my sanity, always painting me as the neurotic one. Her presence became a suffocating shroud, and I started to feel suffocated in my own home, in my own life, trapped in a meticulously constructed web of lies. The portrait of my marriage was no longer a masterpiece of love, but a disturbing, distorted caricature of betrayal and deceit, meticulously painted by the two people I had trusted most in the world. The realization that they were working together, a silent, insidious conspiracy against me, began to solidify, chilling me to my very core, freezing me in a tableau of silent horror. The day the truth unfurled began, ironically, with an unexpected gift of time. A sudden, severe rainstorm had swept through Seattle, forcing the cancellation of a major art installation I was overseeing in a downtown gallery. The organizers called early that morning, apologetically explaining that the weather had made transport of fragile pieces impossible, granting me an unscheduled afternoon. Instead of going home immediately, I decided to seek solace in art that wasn't my own to clear my head. I drove to a small, independent gallery I loved, tucked away in an unassuming part of Capitol Hill, hoping to lose myself in the works of other artists, to find a moment of peace. As I wandered through the quiet space, admiring the bold brushstrokes of a local landscape artist, a gnawing unease pulled me back towards my own life. My intuition, dulled by months of gaslighting, suddenly sharpened, a primal sense of alarm. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I left the gallery abruptly, the desire for quiet contemplation replaced by an urgent, almost desperate need to return home. I drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach with every turn of the wheel. The streets were slick with rain, reflecting the gray, turbulent sky, a mirror to my own inner turmoil. It was as if the universe itself was weeping in anticipation of the storm about to break in my life. As I pulled up to our loft building, my eyes immediately scanned the parking garage entrance. David's sleek black sedan was already in its usual spot, earlier than usual for a Tuesday, and then I saw it. Rachel's distinctively customized vintage convertible, a bright red splash against the gray concrete, parked conspicuously by the back entrance, a place she only used if she wanted to be unseen. A cold wave of shock washed over me, chilling me to the bone. Rachel rarely visited without calling, especially when I was home. And her car being there at this hour with David's, a sickening realization began to dawn, a truth too terrible to acknowledge. I parked 2 blocks away, my heart pounding like a frantic drum against my ribs, each beat echoing the fear in my ears. I walked the rest of the way, my steps heavy, almost reluctant, each one dragging me closer to an unbearable truth. The loft was eerily quiet as I let myself in, the familiar sounds of the city muffled by the pouring rain. A faint murmur of voices, then hushed laughter, drifted from our bedroom, a low, intimate sound that sent shivers down my spine. The laughter wasn't David's usual robust chuckle, nor was it Rachel's customary effervescent giggle. It was intimate, conspiratorial, a sound of shared secret glee. A chilling certainty seized me, tightening its grip around my throat. My hand trembled as I reached for the bedroom doorknob. My mind screamed at me to turn back, to preserve the fragile illusion for just a little longer, to cling to the last vestiges of my shattered peace. But my feet remained rooted to the spot, compelled by an invisible force. A surge of desperate courage, fueled by months of gnawing suspicion, pushed me forward. I deserved to know. I deserved the truth. With a force I didn't know I possessed, a strength born of desperation, I pushed the door open. The scene that assaulted my eyes would forever be seared into my memory, a grotesque, distorted portrait of betrayal that would haunt my dreams for months. David and Rachel, my husband and my sister, were entangled in our bed, in my bed, surrounded by the very pillows I had chosen, the crisp white sheets I had carefully selected during our anniversary trip to New York. David's eyes, wide with pure shock, met mine, a flicker of raw guilt, then a flash of desperate, panicked anger crossing his face. Rachel, propped up against the headboard, looked startled for a split second, her eyes widening, before her expression morphed into a slow, deliberate smirk, almost one of triumph, a cruel satisfaction. Jessica, David scrambled, pulling the sheet higher, a pathetic attempt at modesty. It's not what it looks like, I can explain. His voice was a pathetic whisper, devoid of its usual authoritative tone, laced with pure panic. My voice, surprisingly calm despite the storm raging inside me, cut through the silence like a cold knife. Explain what, David? Explain how you're in my bed with my sister. Please enlighten me. I'm all ears. Rachel, completely unfazed, almost bored by the interruption, interjected, Well, this is just inconvenient timing. Her casual indifference, the sheer audacity of her statement, ignited a fresh wave of ice-cold fury within me, a silent roar that threatened to consume everything. How long? I demanded, my voice low and trembling, raw with suppressed rage. How long has this been going on? Rachel crossed her arms, her smirk widening, a cold, calculating glint in her eyes. Oh, a good 4 years if you want the honest truth. Started right after your last big art exhibit opening. Remember when David said he was working late and I needed a ride home because my car broke down. Now you know why. 4 years. 4 years of their secret life, woven intricately into the very fabric of mine. 4 years while I was planning our future, discussing fertility treatments, renovating our home, celebrating anniversaries, and believing in a love that was a complete fabrication. David finally found his voice, a pathetic, desperate plea. Jessica, please, it just happened. We never meant to hurt you. It was just a moment of weakness. I scoffed, a bitter, hollow sound that barely escaped my lips. It just happened for 4 years. Did it just happen when you emptied half of our joint savings into a secret account last month? Or when you bought Rachel those diamond earrings she's wearing right now, from our money, the money we saved for our future? Their stunned silence, the sudden widening of their eyes, was all the confirmation I needed. The true horror wasn't just the affair. It was the calculated, deliberate deception, the insidious financial abuse intertwined with the emotional and physical betrayal. The illusion of my perfect life shattered into a million irreparable pieces, leaving me standing amidst the wreckage, breathless and broken. The immediate aftermath of the bedroom confrontation was a dizzying blur of raw emotion and chilling clarity, like a canvas rapidly losing its color and form. David, still scrambling to pull on his discarded clothes, began a pathetic stream of apologies and desperate pleas. Jessica, please, we can fix this. It was a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. Don't throw everything away. His voice was a thin, reedy whisper, devoid of its usual authoritative tone, merely a desperate attempt to salvage his crumbling facade. Rachel, however, showed no such desperation. Her initial smirk had settled into a defiant, almost cold expression. You know, Jessica, she drawled, pulling the sheet higher, a theatrical gesture, David was never truly happy with you. You're too absorbed in your art, too focused on your own world. He needed someone who understood him, someone who put him first, like me. Her words were a deliberate dagger, designed to twist the blade of betrayal deeper into my heart, her voice dripping with venom, blaming me for their depravity. This casual cruelty, the audacity of her justification, solidified my resolve. There was no fixing this. There was only severing. My mind, usually so meticulously organized, raced, yet a strange, detached calm settled over me like the eye of a hurricane. I looked at David, then at Rachel, and realized I was looking at strangers, grotesque caricatures of the people I had loved and trusted. The silence in the room stretched, punctuated only by the distant patter of rain against the windows, a mournful drumbeat. "There's nothing to fix," I stated, my voice surprisingly steady, though it felt as if someone else were speaking, as if my own voice had abandoned me. "You two can fix each other if you ever manage to." I turned on my heel, walked out of the bedroom, and into the living area of our loft, the silence following me. My hands, still trembling slightly, reached for my phone, a lifeline in the chaos. The first call was to my closest friend, Sarah. Her gasp of horror and immediate offer of support was a lifeline, a glimmer of sanity in the encroaching madness. "I'm coming over, Jess. Don't move." The second call was to a divorce attorney, recommended by a gallerist friend, Jennifer Thorne, known for her sharp mind and unwavering resolve in complex cases. She promised to be there within the hour. By the time Jennifer Thorne arrived at the loft, her presence radiating competence and calm, David and Rachel had reluctantly dressed and were sitting on the couch, a tableau of simmering resentment and forced composure. Jennifer, with her tailored suit and piercing gaze, wasted no time. Her voice was firm, authoritative. "Mr. Reynolds, Miss Davies has informed me of the situation. As of this moment, you are to vacate the premises. Any attempt to remove joint property without a signed agreement will be considered theft. Rachel," she turned her formidable gaze on my sister, "you are to leave and have no further contact with Miss Davies, effective immediately." David sputtered, his face pale, "But this is my home." "We're married?" Jennifer merely raised an eyebrow, her expression unwavering. "Not for long. And the law provides for immediate protective orders in cases of marital misconduct and financial impropriety. You will be served with papers by end of day." The mention of financial impropriety brought a flicker of genuine fear to David's eyes. Rachel, ever defiant, merely sneered, a tight, unpleasant smile on her lips. "This is pathetic, Jessica. You're just being dramatic, as usual. David was never yours anyway." I met her gaze, no longer with pain, but with a cold, clear resolve. "No, Rachel, this is me taking back my life. From both of you." The following weeks were a brutal, emotionally draining battle, a relentless legal and personal war. David's family, particularly his mother, Alina, launched a vicious smear campaign against me, painting me as a neurotic, vengeful ex-wife who was overreacting to a minor marital indiscretion. Alina called me incessantly, her voice dripping with venom. "How dare you break up David's marriage over a single mistake? He deserves forgiveness. You're destroying our family." I simply hung up each time, eventually blocking her number. Rachel, meanwhile, took to social media, posting cryptic messages about toxic relationships and moving on from negativity, accompanied by seemingly innocent photos of her enjoying lavish meals or new designer clothes, clearly trying to manipulate public perception and garner sympathy. Her online narrative was one of a victim, tragically entangled in someone else's drama. Jennifer, however, was a force of nature, a legal titan. She immediately filed for divorce, citing irretrievable breakdown with explicit grounds of infidelity and extensive financial misconduct. She secured a temporary restraining order against both David and Rachel, preventing them from contacting me or coming within a certain distance of the loft or my gallery. The discovery of David's hidden accounts, the significant funds siphoned from our joint savings, and the extravagant gifts purchased for Rachel, all meticulously documented by Jennifer's forensic accounting team, solidified my case. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a calculated financial betrayal, a long con executed with chilling precision. David, realizing the severity of his legal predicament, initially tried to stall, hiding assets and attempting to transfer funds to offshore accounts. But Jennifer was always one step ahead, her experience with white-collar fraud proving invaluable, freezing his assets and forcing him into full disclosure. The emotional toll was immense. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded, haunted by fragmented dreams. My appetite vanished, and the vibrant colors of my studio seemed dull, lifeless, mocking my internal desolation. Yet beneath the pain, a steel resolve formed, hardening my spirit. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my financial security, and my sense of self from the wreckage of their deceit. Every legal victory, no matter how small, was a tiny brushstroke of healing, slowly repainting the portrait of my future. I was no longer a victim. I was a fighter, determined to expose their treachery and reclaim my life. The battle raged on, but with each passing day, I felt a flicker of hope, a resurgence of my true colors. The public condemnation of Rachel and David, as the financial irregularities became apparent, began to turn the tide. Their carefully constructed lives, built on lies and stolen dreams, began to crumble under the weight of their own deceit. And I, the betrayed artist, watched, silent and resolute, as the masterpiece they thought they had created for themselves unraveled before my very eyes. The legal battle that ensued was a protracted, exhausting ordeal, each court date a fresh wound reopening, bleeding energy from my soul. David and Rachel, united in their deceit, mounted a desperate defense, attempting to discredit my character and paint me as a neurotic, vengeful ex-wife who had simply lost her mind. They lied under oath with disturbing ease, twisted facts with practiced skill, and attempted to obscure the complex financial trail of their illicit dealings with bewildering explanations. Rachel, leveraging her charm and what remained of her connections in the design world, even managed to rally a few gullible mutual acquaintances to their side, spreading insidious rumors that I was emotionally unstable and prone to dramatic outbursts, an unhinged artist. The public shaming, orchestrated through whispers and carefully placed social media posts from anonymous accounts, was a cruel, insidious extension of their personal betrayal. My art, once my sanctuary and solace, felt tainted, my creativity stifled by the constant pressure of litigation and the suffocating weight of their pervasive lies. Yet through it all, Sarah, my steadfast friend, remained my unwavering anchor, a constant source of strength, reminding me daily to trust my instincts and to never, ever doubt my worth. "They're trying to break you, Jess," she'd say, her voice firm. "Don't let them." It was amidst this relentless turmoil, roughly 6 months after that fateful discovery, that the desperate messages from David began. They started subtly at first, a few missed calls from an unknown Seattle number, then short, cryptic texts. "We need to talk, Jess, it's urgent, please." I ignored them, my resolve hardened by months of their cruelty, my heart encased in a protective layer of ice. Let them devour each other, I thought, a bitter satisfaction curling in my gut. But then the messages grew more frequent, more frantic, their tone shifting from pleas for reconciliation to a chilling unraveling of Rachel's true, terrifying machinations. "She's unstable, Jessica. You don't understand what she's capable of. She's turned on me. She's coming for everything." My initial reaction was a cold satisfaction, but a deeper, morbid curiosity, a primal need for complete understanding, compelled me to listen. The voicemails were a cascade of raw desperation, each one peeling back a new, more sinister layer of Rachel's insidious plan. David, now isolated and increasingly frantic, with his own legal troubles mounting, reluctantly began to corroborate the details. He revealed that Rachel had not merely been his lover, but his puppet master, pulling his strings, directing his every move. She had meticulously orchestrated their affair not out of love for him, or even genuine affection, but as a calculated means to gain financial leverage, using him as a pawn in a much larger, more nefarious scheme to steal business contacts and intellectual property from David's prestigious firm. "It wasn't just us, Jess," David sobbed in one particularly desperate message, his voice ragged with fear, raw with a newly discovered terror. "Rachel coerced me, she blackmailed me. She had dirt on my boss, threatened to expose confidential company information, insider trading if I didn't help her. She made me transfer the funds, she told me what to say, how to act. She controlled every single move." He confessed that Rachel had initially approached him not for romance, not with flirtation, but with a nefarious business proposition. To subtly undermine his firm from the inside, steal high-value clients, and funnel sensitive data to a rival interior design company she was secretly planning to join, a company that was notorious for its aggressive, almost predatory tactics. Their affair, David claimed, was merely a tool, a means for Rachel to gain his unwavering loyalty and cooperation, to keep him under her thumb. He detailed how Rachel had deliberately planted the suspicious evidence for me to find, the ambiguous texts, the expensive cologne, the unexplained hotel stays, not out of carelessness, but as a calculated move to force my hand, to accelerate the divorce, and thus free David from his marital obligations so he could fully commit to her grand scheme without complications. He explained that Rachel's ultimate goal was not just to ruin David's career, but to completely strip him of his substantial financial assets, to fund her own, much larger and more ruthless ambitions in the cutthroat corporate world. She wanted to build an empire, and he was just a disposable stepping stone. The messages continued, painting a portrait of Rachel as a cunning, manipulative strategist, a Machiavellian figure far more ruthless and disturbed than I could have ever imagined. David described in excruciating detail how she had slowly isolated him from his own friends and colleagues, gaslighting him into believing that only she truly understood his vision and could help him achieve his true potential. He detailed instances where Rachel had deliberately sabotaged his professional relationships, subtly undermining his reputation with his superiors, spreading rumors about his competency, making him increasingly reliant on her twisted counsel. He confessed that the large withdrawals from our joint account weren't just for gifts. They were significant investments into a series of shell companies Rachel secretly controlled, fronts for her illicit dealings and money laundering operations. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place, forming a horrifyingly coherent picture. Rachel's dismissive remarks, her subtle digs at my art, her constant comparisons, her seemingly helpful interventions in our lives, they were all part of a long con, a carefully constructed narrative designed to dismantle my life and David's, not for love, but for absolute power and immense financial gain. The final, most chilling message revealed Rachel's ultimate betrayal of David. She had used his vulnerabilities and his desperation to extort him, threatening to expose his unwitting involvement in her corporate espionage if he didn't comply with her most extreme demands. When he finally refused to take a final, reckless step that would have irrevocably destroyed his career and landed him in prison, she abandoned him without a second thought, leaving him to face the full legal and financial fallout of their shared crimes alone. David's desperate cries for help were not about me or even a desire for reconciliation. They were pleas for protection from the monster he had helped create, the sister he had betrayed me with. It was a macabre, chilling confession, a testament to Rachel's dark brilliance and David's utter foolishness, his pathetic naivete. As I listened, a strange mix of profound vindication and distant pity washed over me. Their downfall was not a direct result of my actions, but of the venomous machinations they had unleashed upon each other. The art of betrayal, it seemed, was a double-edged sword, and they had both been cut by its unforgiving blade. My masterpiece of pain was unraveling, revealing the true, grotesque colors of their relationship. Armed with David's confessions, a deluge of voicemails, emails, and even hastily scribbled notes detailing Rachel's intricate plans, Jennifer and her team moved with calculated precision. David, trapped between his terror of Rachel and the looming consequences of his own actions, reluctantly corroborated the details, providing further evidence against my sister. His fear of Rachel was palpable, a stark contrast to the once confident, arrogant man I had known. He described her methods in chilling detail, how she had leveraged his insecurities, manipulated his desire for power and wealth, and slowly, systematically, orchestrated his professional and personal downfall, all while ostensibly building a future with him. Rachel, David revealed, had never loved him. He was merely a means to an end, a disposable stepping stone in her ruthless ascent to wealth and influence. She had methodically drained his personal accounts, leaving him financially crippled, and implicated him in fraudulent schemes, ensuring his once promising career in finance was irrevocably ruined. The revelation that she had abandoned him, leaving him to face the legal consequences of their shared corporate espionage and fraud alone, was the ultimate act of her calculated cruelty, the final brushstroke in her portrait of deceit. The truth, once hidden beneath layers of lies and gaslighting, now exploded into the public sphere with the force of a supernova. Jennifer, with her unparalleled legal acumen, strategically leaked carefully redacted portions of David's confessions to a few trusted, influential journalists. She framed the narrative not as a messy divorce, but as a gripping, cautionary tale of corporate espionage, financial fraud, and profound familial betrayal. Rachel's meticulously crafted public image as a rising star in interior design, a paragon of taste and integrity, crumbled into dust. Her high-profile clients, shocked and disgusted by the revelations of her duplicity and the criminal charges now being discussed, began pulling their lucrative contracts with immediate effect. Her business, Rachel Designs, built on a foundation of lies and manipulation, imploded within weeks, leaving behind a trail of angry investors and damaged reputations. The luxury car, the expensive jewelry, the lavish lifestyle she had so brazenly flaunted, all were revealed to be fruits of her illicit dealings, a testament to her insatiable greed and her willingness to exploit anyone in her path. The rival company she had planned to join, now fully aware of the extent of her unethical practices and the legal quagmire she had created, swiftly disassociated themselves from her, leaving her professionally isolated and publicly disgraced. Her name became synonymous with scandal. The karmic revenge, though not orchestrated by me, unfolded with a grim, almost poetic justice. David, stripped of his fortune and reputation, faced numerous lawsuits from his former firm, from the government, and from disgruntled clients he had inadvertently defrauded under Rachel's direction. His attempts to pivot and rebuild his career were met with universal derision and outright refusal. No one in the financial world, nor any legitimate business, would touch him. He spiraled into a deep, clinical depression, his former charm replaced by a hollow shell of self-pity and resentment, a ghost haunting his former life. Rachel, once the epitome of elegance and success, became a social pariah. Her once vast and influential social circle evaporated overnight. Friends turned their backs, former colleagues shunned her, and even her parents, my aunt and uncle, realizing the full extent of her depravity and the public scandal she had brought upon their family name, completely distanced themselves, refusing to answer her calls. She was left with nothing but the ruins of her ambition and the bitter taste of her own deceit, her grand plans reduced to ashes. My parents, who had so readily dismissed my pain and sided with Rachel, found themselves caught in the brutal crossfire of the public scandal. Their carefully maintained facade of suburban respectability shattered. They faced awkward, scrutinizing questions from longtime friends, neighbors, and even distant relatives. Their unwavering silence regarding Rachel's actions, their initial dismissal of my accusations, was now widely interpreted as complicity, or at the very least, a shameful display of blind favoritism. The public humiliation, coupled with the devastating realization that their favored daughter was a manipulative fraudster facing potential criminal charges, forced them to confront the agonizing consequences of their unwavering, uncritical bias. The calls from my mother, once accusatory and dismissive, became apologetic, filled with raw regret and unspoken shame. She rarely mentioned Rachel, focusing instead on hollow apologies for not seeing or not believing me. My father, usually so stoic and emotionally reserved, confessed to a distant relative that he had been blinded by ambition for Rachel, too consumed by her outward success to see the darkness within. Their public reckoning, though painful to witness, brought a strange, quiet sense of vindication. It was a justice I hadn't sought, but one that arrived nonetheless, proving that truth, like a powerful current, will eventually find its way to the surface. The divorce was finalized with surprising swiftness, given the complexity of the initial legal battle. David, utterly broken, his spirit crushed, agreed to a settlement that heavily favored me, unable to fight any longer, his will entirely gone. As I walked out of the courthouse on that crisp Seattle morning, a free woman, I saw David hunched over on a public bench outside, a shadow of his former self, his once tailored suit hanging loosely on his skeletal frame. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, not with anger but with a profound, desolate sadness, a bottomless pit of regret. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he whispered, his voice barely audible, devoid of all his former charisma. "She ruined everything." "She ruined me?" I simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of his hollow words, and continued walking, not looking back. The searing anger, the crushing pain, the bitter resentment, they had begun to recede, replaced by a profound, overwhelming sense of liberation. The distorted portrait of my life had been utterly dismantled, and in its place, the canvas was finally clear, clean, and ready for a new, authentic masterpiece. The karmic threads of their intertwined betrayals had woven their own downfall, and I, the silent artist, was simply a witness to their self-destruction, watching from a distance as their carefully constructed world imploded. My new beginning found its home in a quiet coastal town in Northern California, a place where the rhythmic, insistent crash of the Pacific waves provided a soothing counterpoint to the residual echoes of my past. I found a charming, slightly dilapidated Victorian house with large windows overlooking the ocean, its potential as an art studio immediately apparent. The salty air and endless horizon felt like a cleansing balm to my weary soul. The renovation process became a deeply therapeutic act, a physical manifestation of my internal rebuilding. Each swing of the hammer, each stroke of paint, each discarded piece of rotten wood felt like a reclaiming of space, a rebuilding of my inner world, a dismantling of old pain. I immersed myself in my art, rediscovering the pure, unadulterated joy of creation, allowing my emotions to flow onto the canvas without inhibition. The colors that had once faded during my ordeal now exploded with renewed vibrancy, reflecting the burgeoning hope and resilience within me. My new works were bolder, more raw, more emotionally honest, infused with a newfound strength and a quiet, fierce determination. They were a testament to survival, to transformation, to the profound beauty that can emerge from the ashes of betrayal. My art became my voice, speaking volumes where words failed. Building a new life from scratch was challenging, of course, but it was also incredibly liberating. I found a small, supportive artistic community in the town, fellow creators who understood the quiet dedication required for the craft, and who offered genuine camaraderie without judgment or expectation. We would meet for coffee at a local cafe, discuss techniques, or simply walk along the beach in companionable silence. I discovered local farmers' markets bursting with fresh produce, spent mornings walking along the windswept beaches, collecting shells and sea glass, and evenings watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange, pink, and purple. My friendships with Sarah and others who had stood by me during the darkest hours deepened, proving that true connections could withstand even the most brutal storms. Therapy became an ongoing journey of healing, helping me process the trauma of betrayal and to understand the insidious nature of gaslighting. I learned to trust my instincts implicitly, to recognize the subtle signs of manipulation, and to erect firm, unyielding boundaries, protecting my newfound peace with unwavering resolve. I was no longer afraid to say no, to walk away, to prioritize myself. I occasionally heard whispers of David and Rachel's fates, mostly through distant acquaintances who felt compelled to share the grim updates. David, I learned, had indeed moved back in with his parents, a shadow of his former self, his once thriving career in shambles, his life consumed by profound regret and clinical depression. Rachel, ostracized and professionally ruined, had vanished from the public eye, presumably attempting to rebuild her life in obscurity, far from the spotlight she once craved. Her attempts to launch new ventures had reportedly failed miserably, her reputation preceding her like a dark cloud. Their karmic justice was complete, a cold comfort that served as a stark reminder that deceit, no matter how cunningly executed, ultimately consumes those who wield it. My own journey, however, was no longer defined by their downfall. It was defined by my growth, my resilience, and my unwavering belief in my own strength. The scars remained, a quiet testament to the battles fought, but they no longer dictated my path. They were merely lines on a canvas, part of a larger, evolving masterpiece. I was no longer the unsuspecting woman whose life had been shattered by betrayal. I was the artist, the survivor, the woman who had repainted her own destiny, finding a deeper, more authentic happiness in the quiet rhythms of the coast. My art flourished, my spirit soared, and I finally understood that the greatest masterpiece I would ever create was the life I built for myself, piece by courageous piece, after the storm. Have you ever experienced a similar situation or felt the profound weight of betrayal that ultimately led to an unexpected path of growth and healing? I'd love to hear your stories and reflections in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it touched something deep within your own experiences of resilience after pain, please make sure to subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to hear that transformation awaits on the other side of pain. And your true masterpiece is the life you build for yourself, authentically and without compromise. Thank you for listening to my journey, and always remember that your story isn't over just because a significant chapter has ended. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters come after the most painful ones.